Hey, I'm golf broadcaster Matt Adams. The updated and expanded second edition of my book, The Golf Round I'll Never Forget, Golf's Biggest Stars Recall Their Finest Moments, is now available. Readers can expect to march with Arnie's Army at the 1960 U.S. Open, relive Jack Nicklaus's remarkable 1986 Masters win, and be amazed by the Tiger Slam. The Golf Round I'll Never Forget, Golf's Biggest Stars Recall Their Finest Moments. Pick it up where fine books are sold, including BarnesandNoble.com and Amazon.com.
This podcast is part of the Sports History Network, your headquarters for the yesteryear of your favorite sport. You can learn more at sportshistorynetwork.com.
Hello, sports fans, and welcome to another edition of Yesterday's Sports on the Sports History Network. Whenever football fans talk about great teams of the past that failed in their quest to win the Super Bowl, the 1977 Denver Broncos get overlooked. Perhaps it's because this was the team's first successful season in its 18-year existence. Before 1977, the Broncos had only 3 winning seasons in 17 years. Whatever the reason, they do tend to get overlooked, in my opinion. Looking back at the 1976 season, Denver was 4-4 after 8 games, and it looked like another ho-hum year for Bronco fans. However, the team won 5 of its next 6 games to finish the season at 9-5, its best record in franchise history. That's a .642 winning percentage, good enough to qualify for the playoffs in today's NFL. But not in 1976, when only 4 teams from each conference made the playoffs. Surprisingly, head coach John Ralston resigned during the offseason. Denver had compiled a 34-33-3 record under Ralston in his 5 years as coach, which was better than his predecessors. Red Miller took over as the new head coach. The 1977 season started on a good note with a 7-0 win over the St. Louis Cardinals. Denver's offense wasn't overpowering, gaining just 258 yards, but their defense shut down the Cardinals' typically strong running game, holding them to 69 yards. The following week, the Orange Crush defense dominated the Buffalo Bills, holding them to only 129 total yards, forcing 3 interceptions and sacking quarterback Joe Ferguson 4 times. The Denver running game gained 203 yards, led by Otis Armstrong, who gained 96 yards on 20 carries. The final score was Denver 26, Buffalo 6. In Week 3, the Broncos defense allowed minimum ground yards, giving up 81 rushing yards to the Seahawks. Receiver Haven Moses had a big day for the Broncos offense, catching 5 passes for 92 yards. Running back Rob Lytle scored on a 47-yard touchdown reception, and Denver won 24-13. Denver easily defeated Kansas City in Week 4, 23-7. Quarterback Craig Morton had a good day, completing 13 passes for 189 yards with no interceptions. But the Broncos defense stole the show again, allowing only 166 total yards. Some were skeptical of the Broncos' 4-0 record, since they had not played any playoff contenders yet. But those skeptics became believers after the Broncos destroyed the defending Super Bowl champion Oakland Raiders 30-7 in a Week 5 game at Oakland. Even kicker Jim Turner got in on the action, catching a 25-yard touchdown pass from backup quarterback Norris Weiss. The Broncos' offense gained only 200 total yards, but offered no turnovers. The Orange Crush defense shut down the Raiders' running game, allowing only 87 yards. While they gave up 287 yards through the air, they picked off Raiders quarterback Ken Stabler an astounding 7 times. The Denver defense allowed over 100 yards for the first time this season, as Bengals fullback Pete Johnson gained 108 yards on 16 carries. But the Broncos running game had a good game too, gaining 180 yards. Quarterback Craig Martin and receiver Jack Dolbin hooked up for an 85-yard touchdown reception. Once again, the Broncos had 0 turnovers, taking advantage of 3 Bengals turnovers, and cruised to a 24-13 win. Dating back to Week 9 of the 1976 season, the Broncos had only 1 loss in their last 12 games, but they would suffer a bad loss in a rematch with the Raiders. After 3 quarters, Oakland had a 24-0 lead. Denver scored 2 touchdowns in the 4th quarter, but that wasn't enough. This game was quite the opposite of their prior meeting 2 weeks earlier, when the Raiders' game plan was to pass first and run second. The Raiders passed only 14 times this game and ran 57 times for 200 yards. Raiders running back Clarence Davis had 20 carries for 105 yards. Craig Morton threw 19 completions for 242 yards but was sacked 8 times. After playing the defending champions in 2 of the last 3 games, the Broncos would now play Pittsburgh, the 1974 and 1975 Super Bowl champions. Those who thought Denver would wilt after losing to the Raiders found out otherwise. An 87-yard punt return by Rick Upchurch and a 20-yard touchdown by Haven Moses gave the Broncos a 21-0 halftime lead. The Steelers scored a late touchdown to make the final score 21-7. There wasn't much offense from either team in this game. The Denver defense held Franco Harris to 62 yards on 23 carries and sacked Terry Bradshaw 6 times. Craig Morton didn't fare much better, getting sacked 5 times. The Broncos did not have one of their better games in a Week 9 matchup against the Chargers. Trailing 14-3 at halftime, the Broncos came back to win 17-14. The Denver offense gained only 222 total yards. The Denver defense played their usual solid game, and the Broncos' running game churned out 249 yards against the Chiefs. Otis Armstrong had 120 yards on 21 carries, and Rob Lytle added another 68 yards on just 12 carries. The final score was Denver 14, Kansas City 7. The 9-1 Broncos faced the 9-1 Colts in a Week 11 matchup at Mile High Stadium. The Broncos defense had a tough time containing Colts running back Don McCauley, who caught 11 passes for 112 yards. But they picked off quarterback Burt Jones 3 times and held the Colts to only 90 yards rushing. Craig Morton connected with Rick Upchurch for a 41-yard touchdown strike, and linebacker Tom Jackson returned an interception 73 yards for a touchdown. The final score was Denver 27, Baltimore 13. Despite getting sacked 6 times, Craig Morton played well, completing 13 of 22 passes for 187 yards and 2 touchdowns. Tight end Riley Odoms caught 6 passes for 86 yards and scored a touchdown. While the 1977 Broncos offense was rarely exciting or overpowering, they got the job done. The defense did its usual stellar job, allowing just 251 total yards. Denver 24, Houston 14. In a Week 13 win over the Chargers, receiver Lonnie Perrin got the offense off to a good start with a 41-yard touchdown reception from Craig Morton. The stingy Orange Crush defense gave up 276 yards passing, but Chargers quarterback Dan Fouts needed 41 attempts, and they intercepted him twice. San Diego managed only 64 yards rushing. The final score was 17-9. In the final game of the regular season, the 12-1 Broncos traveled to Dallas to play the 11-2 Cowboys. The game, which had been highly anticipated a few weeks earlier, lost some of its luster, since both teams had already clinched home field advantage in the playoffs. Craig Morton sat out this game. The Broncos defense held running back Tony Dorsett to only 50 yards rushing, but their offense gained only 178 yards in total, and Dallas won 14-6. Defensive end Lyle Alzado, cornerback Bill Thompson, and linebackers Tom Jackson and Randy Gradishar made first-team All-Pro. Red Miller was named Coach of the Year, and Craig Morton was named Comeback Player of the Year. The AFC Divisional Playoff game would be a rematch of the Week 8 game between the Broncos and Steelers. The game was played on Christmas Eve, and the score was tied at 21 in the fourth quarter, when Denver scored 13 unanswered points. Craig Morton played well, completing 11 of 23 passes for 164 yards and 2 touchdowns with no interceptions. The Orange Crush defense played their usual great game, holding Franco Harris to 92 yards on 28 carries. They were equally tough on quarterback Terry Bradshaw, who completed 19 of 37 passes for only 177 yards and threw 3 interceptions. The Broncos played the Raiders in the AFC Championship game on New Year's Day. It was 13 degrees with a wind chill factor of -4. Neither team was able to establish much of a running game, and it was up to the quarterbacks to get it done. Craig Morton connected with Haven Moses in the first quarter on a 74-yard touchdown strike. Moses would finish the game with 5 receptions for 168 yards and 2 touchdowns. Morton completed 10 of 20 passes for 224 yards and threw 2 touchdowns, with only 1 interception. Stabler completed 17 of 35 passes, but only 215 yards. The Broncos led 7-3 in the third quarter and were about to make it 14-3 when running back Rob Lytle was hit by safety Jack Tatum and fumbled. Or so it appeared, but the officials ruled the play had been blown dead, and the Broncos got another chance and took a 14-3 lead. They went on to win 20-17. The 14-2 Broncos would play the 14-2 Dallas Cowboys on January 15, 1978 in Super Bowl XII. The two teams had met 1 month earlier, with Dallas scoring a 14-6 victory. The Broncos' defense played well in the first half, but their offense couldn't seem to do a thing against the Doomsday defense, and they trailed 13-0 at halftime. Things didn't improve in the second half, although Denver scored 1 touchdown and a field goal. The final was Dallas 27, Denver 10. The Orange Crush defense held the Cowboys' running attack to 143 yards on 38 carries and sacked Roger Staubach 5 times. but the Broncos' offense was completely shut down, gaining only 156 total yards. They also had 8 turnovers and allowed 4 sacks. It was a disappointing end to a great season, but it was a season no Broncos fan will ever forget. Okay, that will conclude our podcast for today. Hope you enjoyed it. Thank you, and God bless.
This podcast is part of the Sports History Network, your headquarters for the yesteryear of your favorite sport. You can learn more at sportshistorynetwork.com. Hey there, sports history fan. This is Arnie Chapman, aka the Football History Dude, and I hope that you enjoyed this recent episode presented by the Sports History Network and were able to learn some good old-fashioned sports history knowledge nuggets. I started the Sports History Network back in 2020 with the mission to help podcasters find a community of like-minded sports history nerds, as well as helping aspiring podcasters to start their own shows. We have a little bit over 30 shows on the network right now covering all sorts of sports history, but as far as I'm concerned, we're just at the toothpick in the ocean moment, that can't even figure it out because there's so much more coming. We wanted to create the ultimate headquarters for sports yesteryear, starting with Podcast Network and our website, but we're going to continue to move into other mediums as well. And here's the cool part, because we want you to be part of our team. So if you're interested in starting your own podcast, or maybe being a guest on one of our shows, or who knows, maybe even writing an article for us over on the website. Seriously, all you gotta do is reach out to us on the contact page over at sportshistorynetwork.com. You can be as technologically savvy as a Neanderthal tapping on a stone trying to figure out this whole hieroglyphics thing back in the day. Again, it doesn't matter, because even if you don't understand the whole podcast space, we have a production team that can pretty much help you out with doing everything. All you gotta do, head over to sportshistorynetwork.com, head to the contact page, fill it out. That message goes right to me, and I'll reach out to you as soon as I can. But for now, dude, I'm through if you're through.